I need help understanding something here, and what I um am having a hard time, understanding is, like, which one is it? Um, and I hear a lot, in some songs, and some pastors, talking about how the church at times needs to be corrected, or you know sometimes the body needs to be corrected, or um sometimes somebody in Jesus Christ might need a correction, which technically by definition is a rebuke, because a rebuke is uh saying, hey, you need correction. um I think oftentimes Christians don't like the word rebuke because it sounds like it's a harsh word. um but really the definition of a rebuke is bringing correction. um Now, sometimes a rebuke, what I find is sometimes it can be, given in a tough love sort of way, but, you know, I think sometimes when a rebuke is given in a tough love sort of way, I think oftentimes Christians put up a shield. Um, and they don't often want to hear that type of rebuke. But there's that. And then I hear in some songs, and from some pastors, that um a brother isn't supposed to go up against another brother, like, meaning how Satan likes to get the church to be against each other. And I agree to that, like, but sometimes I think that we start telling people that when we don't like that we are being corrected as a church, or as a pastor, or a songwriter. You got to think, like, why is it that you're, I mean, because that's true. We don't want to be against each other. We are brothers and sisters. I mean, but at the same time, brothers and sisters argue. There's times when brothers and sisters, you know, that is, something that I would say that sometimes maybe the the body, like, again, like maybe a pastor or a songwriter, somebody of importance, maybe doesn't understand that, like, well, a family sometimes argues. And so just because, you know, I disagree with a pastor, and just because, like, think about a family that is in a disagreement. Well, both sides are going to give the reason why they, disagree or whatever. That isn't necessarily always bad. Sometimes that can be good if you're able to talk it out, right? But oftentimes, I sometimes get the picture that when you disagree with, somebody in the church with, authority, and you give your reason, it's almost like they, I, it just sometimes seems like they mistake that for you, like an argument, like you're trying to put your final word out or whatever. And they might, try to correct you on that when maybe that wasn't your intention. But anyways, put in the comments what you think, because I think sometimes there is a double standard here. Not always, but I think sometimes there is a double standard, because, like, yeah, people that say that, we're not, against each other, like, there's truth in that. But then, like, to me, I would ask the question, why are they saying that? Are they saying it because they don't like the rebuke? Or, like, is it because they're truly trying to keep the church from, battling each other? Or are they saying that because, like I mentioned earlier, because they don't like the rebuke that they're getting? You got to be careful of why you are, always saying, things like that. Because, like, there's many times in scripture where prophets do rebuke, and some, God sends, like, maybe a prophet or some, like Paul. He wrote many letters to churches, and some of those letters that Paul wrote to churches were kind of like that tough love, saying, you know and so what are we saying? Are we, saying that the body needs correction? Or, because it cannot be both. It can't be both. You can't preach a sermon on, like, rebuking and things like that, but then, like, whenever God sends somebody that sees something, you can't, so